Coming up on Mississippi Roads, we visit little museums. We go to the Mississippi Industrial Heritage Museum in Meridian, the Bridge Museum in Horn Lake, as well as museums for model trains and motorcycles. All that coming up now on Mississippi Roads.
Down Mississippi Road. Mississippi Road.
Hi, welcome to Mississippi Roads. I'm your host, Walt Grayson. It occurs to me that we in Mississippi have a lot of pride, so we'd like to show off a little bit. And we've discovered there's no better way to show off our pastimes or our history or our collections than to put them in museums. We've got a lot of small museums in the state, and that's what we're concentrating on this week. Matter of fact, we're in one right now, the Macomb Railroad Museum. And I'll tell you more about this one as we go. But our first stop is in Meridian at the Mississippi Industrial Heritage Museum.
This was the last commercial steam engine factory in America. They actually stayed in business longer than any other steam engine manufacturer. And there were hundreds of them at one time in the United States.
Well, Meridian was the industrial center of the state and of the region. Birmingham only was an area that had more than Meridian industry-wise in the early 20th century. And so Soule was an integral part of that industrial development. Mr. Soule, who founded the company, was a very big industrialist and inventor. And during his lifetime, he did 40 patents, but he did something that most people in those days didn't do, is he not only patented something, he manufactured it. And so that really made a big difference in the family owning Soule for 110 years. The family owned it from 1892 until 2002. And at that point, you know, Bob was ready to retire.
Bob Soule and I used to eat lunch together at Weidman's. It had a long counter, and you sit by a different person most every day. And one day I was next to Bob, and Bob told me that he couldn't go any further with the Soule Works, Steamworks, because they weren't making any sales, and the bank was about to take them over, and they were going to have to close it and have an auction. And I said, Bob, you just can't do that. That place is like a museum. It's a step back in time, and it shows our history here in Meridian. We just don't need to lose that. And he said, well, it's up to you then. And so I bit off a little bit more than I wanted to chew at that dinner that day.
In 2003, we had cleaned up the site enough that we thought, hey, this would be really neat to invite the public, especially the local public, to come in and see what we were doing down here. And so we said, okay, we're going to set up this date, we're going to have a little steam event. And so word of mouth, no advertising, we had 400 people come to visit us that day. And we said, wow, this is very, very popular. And people kept saying, you're going to do it again next year, we hope. And we said, sure, why not? And so then the very next year we had the Soule Live Steam Festival in name and activity. And so we were really excited. It's continued to grow. We've had as many as 6,000 people come.
Industrial museums are quite popular over in Europe, and lots of people have come from England and Western Europe. We have visitors from all over the United States that have come at one time or the other. On festival day, we have a draw of 3 or 4 states away as usual, but occasionally there'll be someone who's come down from the New England states, or maybe from North or South Dakota. An industrial museum is different from what we think of as a museum today, like an art museum or arts and entertainment museum, something that you feel like you can go through and see an hour or 2 hours time. Here at Soule, it takes at least a day to go through and see everything in operation and see how it works. Well, a steam engine has a lot of personality when it's operating under live steam. It's got a heat thing that you feel, it's a motion that you see, and it's a sound that you hear.
During the STEAM Festival, we have demonstrators that come in from all over the southeastern United States, and they demonstrate different things. We have people that demonstrate with cast aluminum, cast iron. They do some casting here during the day, both Friday and Saturday. And then we have people that do blacksmithing, which is a very popular event here. You can see how hard a blacksmith actually works to turn a piece of iron into a useful object. We have a broom making shop. We have someone who does spinning and weaving. We have even some of the very earliest type of industry that was in our area that the Native Americans did, and that was flint knapping.
On the big picture, you need to know your history to know how civilization got where it is today, because we don't want to lose the level of civilization that we have, the iPhones and the air conditioning and all the good things that we have. But those things just weren't around. They had to be built up. And places like this is what actually worked civilization or our lifestyle up to what it is now. And it was a lot of hard work. So we feel like it's up to us to tell that story here in Meridian. And hopefully that story can be heard all over Mississippi and the United States and Europe.
I would imagine there's hundreds of these small museums around Mississippi, and it's hard to know about all of them. Matter of fact, you might not even know about this one, where we are this week at the Macomb Railroad Museum. But then again, you might, not to blow our own whistle, but 90,000 people visited this museum last year. Another museum that does not like for visitors is the American Contract Bridge Museum. It's in Horn Lake, and that's where we're going now.
The ACBL is the governing body of Duplicate Tournament Bridge. We sanction clubs and games and tournaments and teachers and directors. We're here in our museum in Horn Lake, Mississippi. The museum opened in June of 2010. We've been here almost 9 years. We moved here from a building in Memphis that we had been in since 1972. It's a self-guided tour. We've got a lot of interactive displays, lots of video footage. You could take 10 hours to get through just half of what's here or 5 minutes just to go, okay. Just depends. You get out of it what you put into it. The ACBL Museum basically takes you on a journey from when bridge became popular and how it's evolved today. We specialize really in competitive bridge, but there's still millions of social bridge players out there in the world. Tournament bridge is a lot different. It's a sport. It's got rules that you have to follow when you play. So there's no deviation from those rules without penalties and everything else like any other sporting event.
I started playing bridge at college in Bulgaria when I was attending the University of Sofia. Then back in 2005, I rejoined the game and joined the ACBL. And I started playing and actually started playing competitively. I started attending the tournaments. This is the game which once you start playing, probably it will be for life. So sooner or later, even you stop, you'll be back in the game.
I've been an ACBL member since the early 70s, and I've known about the museum since it started, so it's been 10 years. But the Hall of Fame, which I'm more interested in, has been in existence for many decades.
So a trump indicator is not really anything you would see in bridge today. It was a little tabletop gadget that had all the suit symbols on it and some way to mark which suit was trump. They're the most amazing little things. They're cats and Mickey Mouse. It's a neat little collection. You could look at it for a long time. Joan had been collecting these little items for about 40 years and was looking to move to Florida and downsize. And she wanted her precious babies to have a nice home. So we set up a foundation, accepted her collection, and it was kind of the cornerstone of building a museum when we moved to our new building. One of the most amazing things we have is our trophy collection, and they all go back to, national bridge events have been played since the 30s. And so all these amazing, gorgeous, gigantic silver trophies have been donated by players or in memory of other players, over the last 80 years. And it's something to behold. It takes up a whole wall of the museum. Certainly during the Depression, bridge really took off. It didn't cost anything to sit around with all your neighbors and play a card game. And so it really got popular then. Throughout the 40s, it got even more popular, and in the 50s is when you start seeing it on television. And like today, even a lot of our Hall of Fame members will tell you that they first got interested in the game because they saw a championship bridge with Charles Gorin on TV. Mr. Gorin was probably the biggest, most well-known promoter of bridge. He was Mr. Bridge, as they called him. We're definitely not still in the heyday of bridge, although the game is classic and will always be a great game. It's harder with technology and everything to get people to come out and actually be social in real life.
The ACBL currently has about 150,000 members, and that's down from about 160,000. In most European countries, the Netherlands, France, and some Asian countries, Indonesia and China, bridge is on the upswing. In North America, in Canada and the US, there's been a bit of a downswing. Part of the reason for that is we're aging. The average age of our members is still pretty old, too old, in my opinion. And for the game to survive, we do need to get more young players into the game. There's no question of that. For bridge, all you need is a pack of cards and 4 players and a table. It's not very complicated. You can teach someone the rudiments of bridge in 10 minutes, but it takes a lifetime to become truly accomplished, and I haven't yet. I'm still hoping.
The museum exceeded my expectation. It was so interesting. The videos which are here, the trophies, the whole experience just is amazing.
A unique thing about the Railroad Museum here in Macomb is their display of actual train cars, like a one-of-a-kind U.S. postal car and a rare 1890s office car. And then this guy, a 200-ton locomotive from 1921. This was one of the 2 largest engines in the Illinois Central Fleet. Now, while this museum displays big trains, our next museum displays little ones.
People are mostly surprised by what we have inside the doors, because when you drive by, we have red buildings and they just don't realize how big it is inside. We're a mini train Disneyland. You can come in and just have a great time, enjoy the day and go back in time, and we're just a huge generational connector. We get a lot of families, larger families, that come in, and they're very appreciative that we are free admission because they can't afford to go spend $10, $15, $20 per person to do activities.
One of the things that kind of gets them started is they find out that we have room for birthday parties. Bring their goodies in and bring the kids in, and the kids have fun out there playing with the trains and looking at the trains and everything. It's a pretty good little entertainment thing for a couple hours. They all seem to like it because They don't want to go home when they decide to go.
Well, we have something for everybody. We have a toddler playroom that has little Thomas the Trains that they can ride on, little tables to play with. We have trains that an entire family can ride on outside, some kids' steam trains. We have a small section of antique trains for older people, and then of course we have the Legos, which everybody seems to go crazy over.
The way that we have the train museum layout basically have these islands, and by islands I mean that we have completely separate layouts. So one is a traditional railroad, the other is a futuristic railroad. That's the one I designed. And the Jurassic Park, which has its own theme. We got over 80 trains here, and there's a lot of different tracks and a lot of different places, and they're blown away by that. The adults come here and they get to see the real precision side of things, so they get to see their detailed, HO scale trains and N-scale trains, a very meticulous design.
One of the things that I love to see is parents interacting with the kids. People aren't on their cell phones, they're actually looking at the displays and they're talking about the displays, and the kids are calling for their parents to come look at the displays, and the parents are talking about their memories of having trains and stories, and it's just a generational connector, and it's a good, wholesome hometown, go back in time feeling. And one of our mission is to bring back the spirit of the American Railroad, so that's what we're trying to do.
I think our museum's really unique from a lot of other museums because we incorporate engineering, architecture, fine artists. All the displays you see is all in proportion to the actual size of, life, trains. And so everything's on a smaller scale, and a lot of it's hand-painted, hand-built, hand-put together. Then all the trains to run, it takes a good bit of engineering skills. I think it's just very educational, and it's different.
Every year we're actually doubling our numbers. So as we're growing, our numbers are growing, our donations are growing, and we just keep expanding. We don't have a typical visitor. It's from ages 1 to 100. The young ones are just mesmerized by the trains and all the activity. The older generation, everybody has a story. Everybody that walks through the door has a train, their grandparents had a train, their parents had a train. Everybody has a train story. It's one of those generational connectors, and that's one of the things I love about the museum. Some of the trains came from our club members when we first opened in 2015. Some of them have been donated over the years, and some of our stuff has been actually purchased. It's actually really special. Just the fact that we can incorporate volunteers, members, and staff, and have a well-oiled machine is really challenging. You have our club members that have so much history and talent, and they're what drive the museum. But then we have our volunteers and our staff that integrate, and it just kind of melds really well together.
We're all about the community. As long as we stay about that, then a lot of people back what we're doing, and it feels good to do something for the Gulfport community.
The collection here at the Macomb Railroad Museum dates all the way from the 1960s back to the 1800s. And it takes a lot of cooperation between the board of directors and civic leaders, and of course a lot of volunteers to keep this going. On the other hand, our next museum came about from the love of collecting by just one man and his passion for a different kind of engine.
No matter how old you are, I have things here that you may have had when you was a kid, and you can look at it and say, wow, that's what I used to ride right here. I was born in Corinth, Mississippi, and my father moved to Indiana from when I was like 2 till about 12, and then we moved back here, and he went into business here in town. He started the motorcycle business in 1962, and we've been in business since then for 55, 56 years. The first motorcycle that we got when we were living in Indiana was a Hiawatha Doodlebug. And I have one in the museum here. And I have a couple of pictures of me and my brother on it in the museum. So that was the first motorcycle we got, for sure. 30 years later, I didn't even know I was collecting bikes, but that's what happened. Well, in the museum, I have dirt bikes, I have racing bikes, street bikes, I have American bikes, European bikes, Japan, pretty much all over the world. When motorcycles first came out, they were not a cheap form of transportation. They were a rich person's toy. Some of the Indians I got here, I've got a 1926 Indian, and it sold for $500 when it was new, but you could buy a brand new Ford Model T for $200. I count it as an investment. I did do the stock market for a little while, and I didn't really like that because I couldn't control it. But these motorcycles, I know them, I know their value, I can control them, I can look at them, I can touch them. So to me, it's an investment plus a passion. My family likes them, my children, my wife, they're all, they like going to these different places we go. Nobody has a problem with any of it. And, it kind of goes in with my business here, so it's works out for me. It works out really good. Now, my friends, most of my closest friends are collectors, so they all like it.
We're both collectors. We're all collectors, and we have a good time. We go a lot of places together. We have all the same interests, same age. Just old guys having fun. That's just the bottom line.
I've got a bike. It's a '64 Honda Dream. So it's kind of a rat bike, and I just painted it with Rhino truck bed liner, and I named it Rhino. And it's just kind of a rat bike, but I ride it a lot. I ride it on the Transamerica Trail. It's a bike that I use for that a lot, and if you just look at it, it looks like it wouldn't make it to town and back, but I've rode it lots of miles, and it's been very reliable.
Bike riding for me at my age is all about the adventure, the back roads. It's not down the interstate. It's seeing stuff, and we have a lot of stuff to see in Mississippi. I was riding one of my bikes, and I was 16 again, and as I passed a plate glass window, I see my reflection, and it was a fat old man on a 1965 Honda.
I like talking to people as they go back to their childhood and remember things they had and what their father had, and it's a lot of fun talking about that.
Once you start one of these old bikes, the sound, the smell, the vibration, it's just a time machine.
I have brochures, and I have helmets and clothing and trophies, different things like that, but it's all related to motorcycles. In World War II, they used a lot of motorcycles. They had airborne divisions where they parachuted them out of planes, and a lot of GIs rode them, so when they got back, they wanted a motorcycle. So we do have some wartime bikes. My grandson races motocross. He's a 3-time national champion. I have all 3 of his bikes in here. So got a lot of racing history in with the street bikes and dirt bikes also. Motorcycles are my passion. It's what I do in my spare time. I ride. I go to auctions, swap meets, and I really do like riding a lot. And most of my riding is done on my vintage bikes too. My favorite bikes in the museum has to be some of the ones that I bought first. I have 2 bikes in here that I bought brand new in the 60s, and I raced them. One I raced at Daytona, finished 2nd. Another bike is a scrambler that I raced, scramble races back in the 60s. I did that for several years and I enjoyed every minute of it. Then I have some other bikes that are a little more rare. I have a 1969 750 Sandcast Honda that's very low serial number. And then sometimes people ask me, what is my favorite bike? And I say, well, it's the next one I get.
Well, that's the end of the line for our visit to the Macomb Railroad Museum. If you'd like information about anything you've seen on the show, contact us at mpbonline.org/Mississippi Roads. And make sure you like our Mississippi Public Broadcasting Facebook page. And check out our Mississippi Roads Facebook page at the same time. Until next time, I'm Walt Grayson. I'll be seeing you on Mississippi Roads.
Down Mississippi Road. Mississippi Road.
Mississippi Roads is made possible in part by the generous support of viewers like you. Thank you.